It was Christmas Eve, and the entire town seemed wrapped in an atmosphere made of glowing lights, rushing footsteps, and a gentle sense of magic. Families walked with bags full of gifts. Children ran wearing red hats, and soft music echoed between buildings and decorated windows. Yet, in the middle of all that holiday warmth, there was someone who didn't belong to the scene. A man walked slowly, shoulders hunched against the cold, as if the winter wind carried not only the chill, but also the weight of everything he had endured. He carried nothing but an old backpack and a worn-out coat. His steps were heavy, and his eyes looked as though they had witnessed far more life than any soul should. He hadn't eaten properly in days. He hadn't spoken to anyone in months. And that Christmas, he expected nothing, not even a simple Merry Christmas. He simply kept walking with no direction, trying to pass unseen through streets that felt built for everyone except him. When he crossed the main square, he noticed families gathered, taking pictures, laughing, sharing warm embraces. Christmas lights reflected on the snow and on their smiling faces, creating a scene so perfect that it hurt. Inside him, something had tried to ignore stirred again. The feeling of absence. The absence of a home. The absence of someone belonged to. The absence of himself. He found a distant bench and sat down, trying not to draw attention. His eyes landed on a small nativity displayed near the fountain. Soft yellow lights reflected on the water, creating a calming glow. He stared at it for a long moment, studying the simple figures of a mother, a father, and a child. Something tightened in his chest. He looked away. The image reminded him of everything he once had and everything he had lost. As he sat there in silence, he noticed someone approaching. It was an elderly woman, walking slowly while holding a bag filled with warm bread and a neatly folded blanket. Her face was marked with deep wrinkles, the kind life carves only on those who felt much and loved deeply. Her eyes held a gentle kindness, the kind that doesn't announce itself but is immediately felt. She noticed a man alone on the bench and, guided by a quiet instinct, walked toward him. Her presence surprised him. He wasn't used to receiving attention, much less kindness. She sat beside him as though she understood, without any words, the heaviness he carried. She didn't interrogate him or pry into his past. She simply offered presence, as if silently saying that no one should spend Christmas Eve alone. And for the first time in a very long while, the man felt seen. She offered him warm bread, insisting with gentle firmness. He accepted it with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort, but as the warmth reached his hands and then his chest, a barrier within him began to soften, a barrier built over long months of loneliness. She remained there, quietly present, allowing him to open up on his own time. And he did, maybe because the night was cold enough to bring honest truths to the surface. Maybe because her kindness created a safe space he hadn't felt in years. He began sharing pieces of his story. He spoke of everything he had lost. His job, his home, people he loved, and most painfully his will to keep trying. He told her how each loss pushed him further into darkness, until he convinced himself that no one would ever reach out for him again. As he spoke, the woman listened with the kind of attention that feels like a shelter. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge. She simply understood. Her attentive silence was the first embrace he had received in a long time, even without touching him. When he finished, she shared a truth of her own. She told him, in a gentle tone, that she too carried an empty space. She had lost her husband the previous Christmas, and since then, the holiday had become the most difficult day of the year. She baked bread and distributed blankets to fill the silence that loss had left behind. But in reality, she also longed for company. They were two broken souls, meeting unexpectedly on a cold night. The woman then stood up and, with a quiet gesture, invited him to follow her. She led him down the street to a small church lit only by candles flickering in the cool wind. Inside it was quiet and warm, with the faint smell of wood and incense. They sat near the front, where the world felt distant and still. She encouraged him to close his eyes, not to pray, not to follow any particular belief, but simply to listen. And he listened. He listened to his breathing, to the stillness of the room, to the way his heart felt heavy but alive. He listened as the woman spoke softly about the light every person carries inside, a light that never extinguishes, even when buried under layers of pain, fear, or guilt, a light that sometimes sleeps but never disappears. She reminded him that Christmas wasn't about gifts or noise, but about remembering hope, the kind that survives even the darkest nights. And for the first time in a long time, he cried, not from defeat, but from release. His tears were the beginning of something new, washing away the dust that had settled on his spirit. When they stepped outside again, the square looked different. The lights seemed warmer, the music softer, and everything felt touched by a new sense of meaning. He felt lighter. His problems were still there, but he was no longer carrying them alone. The woman told him her name was Clara. He hesitated for a moment, then remembered his own, Gabriel. They walked back to the bench where everything had begun. Before leaving, Clara asked him to return the next day, at the same time, so they could talk again. She promised to bring bread. She hoped he would bring more of his story. He agreed. It was the first promise he had made to someone in a long time, and he genuinely wanted to keep it. She handed him the blanket she had brought and wished him a heartfelt Merry Christmas. He repeated the words with sincerity he thought he had forgotten. After she left, Gabriel walked slowly through the town, feeling warmth he hadn't felt in years. He returned to the nativity scene, approached it quietly, and placed a small piece of bread near the figures, not as a ritual, but as a gesture of gratitude. Gratitude for lights that guide us even when we feel undeserving. Gratitude for unexpected people who help us remember who we are. That night, Gabriel fell asleep with a lighter heart, not because his life had instantly changed, but because he finally believed it could. He understood that Christmas didn't magically fix anything. People did. People who appeared when everything felt lost. People like Clara, who guided others with small acts that carried immense love. And so, on that quiet Christmas Eve, Gabriel rediscovered the light he had forgotten, a light that had always been inside him, waiting for someone or something to remind him it was still there,